Welcome to the Heal with Kat show.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kat show. My name is Kat. I am your host, and welcome to our final episode of 2025. Can you believe it? I actually cannot. This year, we have had the most extraordinary interviews and solos, and I truly feel like as hard as 2025 was, it really was a year that upleveled me with the podcast in the best way. And as we close out the year and the beautiful era of what the podcast has been, I wanted to do something special. In January, we officially shift into the new format of the Heal with Kat show for 2026 and beyond. But I really wanted to take a moment to honor what this podcast has held for all of us, myself included. You know, the stories that we've all heard, the space we've held for people, the space that you've held for me when I've shared some really vulnerable stuff on the podcast this year, the wisdom that our guests brought us, and hopefully that you garnered and gained from my solos. And most importantly, I think the whole reason why I'm doing this, not I think, I know, is to empower you to have cycle breaking conversations that shape your world and your life. And I know this is true for many of us, but this year felt like a threshold. It felt like a void. It felt like a year of truth telling, of choosing ourselves over and over again in the midst of a lot of turmoil, inner and outer, in the world and in our inner world. And it was really a year of remembering that healing is never going to be linear, but there's always sacred chapters of when our healing happens. And trusting that, we can be grateful in hard moments for the little joys that we experience, but also, this ebb of life in 2025, it isn't forever. The flows will come again. And I think that when we find ourselves in the flow, sometimes we look back in hindsight and go, wow, I'm really grateful that I even made it through that difficult season. So hopefully 2025 gets to be one of those for many of us. And, throughout this season, I've had the honor of sitting with some of the most brilliant, heart-centered teachers, doctors, healers, psychologists, researchers, and humans who are redefining what healing looks like, whether that's individually, ancestrally, somatically, spiritually. I've been able to have some really dynamic conversations and meet some really dynamic humans. And I think that's probably the coolest part of having a podcast. So today, we're going to revisit some of the moments that landed the deepest and the most for you. Thanks to YouTube and Spotify and Apple data, we've been able to track the conversations that you've replayed and listened to the most, that you've shared with your friends the most, posted about on social media the most, and then going through some of the comments and the reviews, and especially on YouTube, telling me the ways that you understand your story now in relation to the podcast interview, the solo, even some of the shows that we've put out this year. We've only put out 3 or 4 at this point, but they've been really powerful. And a lot of you have showed up really vulnerably, asking some really deep questions. So this episode is really my love letter to all of you in the community that we're building here together. And we're all black sheep turned cycle breakers somewhere on our journey at a different place and different spectrum, a different time. And we're all people who are learning how to belong to ourselves, belong to our families, and remember that belonging is our birthright. And I've tried really hard to communicate that in so many different ways throughout the last year on the podcast. How can you learn to heal in all of these different ways so that you remember you're worthy, you belong, you are loved, and you are loved, and to find empowerment in that. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And most importantly, I want to thank you for walking this path with me. It's been really beautiful. I'm going to get emotional. It's been really beautiful. As we move into 2026, I'm expecting more twists and more turns, but I'm also hoping that through the Q&A show and just this pivot that we're making, I get to chat with a lot more of you and keep building this incredible community. Also, it would not be a best of 2025 episode if I did not shout out to my incredible podcast producer, Bessie Fong. She deserves a round of applause, even if you're just sitting in your car driving to work. or on a walk somewhere in nature, please send Bessie some love just in your heart. She is really one of the backbones that helps me create and bring this podcast and the show to life. We have been doing so much growing together this year, and she has just been right there next to me the whole time. And really, I'm so grateful to call her a teammate and a friend. So I don't do this alone. This is something that I do in my own little team and community. And I'm just so grateful to Bessie for her and all of the work that she has put into my podcast and my business in the last year. It's unbelievable when you find people who love your business as much as you do, if that, if that's even possible, but at least act like they do, that's really special. You want to keep those people around. All right, let's revisit some of the most powerful conversations in 2025. For our first clip, we're going to look at Len May and this conversation that we had where we talked about epigenetics. I think if there was one conversation that completely blew people's minds this year, it was this one. Len May really helped us understand that healing isn't just emotional or psychological, it's biological too. And the conversation that this sparked on YouTube Shorts, it really gave me the confidence about putting an episode like this out because although it was requested by many, I knew that we could only fit so much information or like scratch the surface in 30 minutes. But of course, Len, the professional that he is, he completely delivered on this because this clip became one of the most shared moments of the entire season. Here's Len and I. Can you explain for us how epigenetics plays a role in the transmission of generational trauma and any kind of specific markers or patterns that you've identified?
Yeah. So there was a study done on the children of Holocaust survivors. And we always believed that genetics refresh every generation. So you have your genes, you have, new generation of children, and they start from scratch. Well, this study proved that there is epigenetic material that is being passed on. So if your ancestors were in the Holocaust and they went through, extreme trauma, now that epigenetic expression is passed down to you and you pass it down to your children as well. So there are specific markers, those stress reactivity, those PTSD markers, those slow rate of fear extinction markers, CNR1, CNR2, FAAH, COMT, BDNF. These are all markers related to those kind of conditions. And if you know this about yourself, that you're having that trauma passed on, there's ways to be able to remove that generational trauma through different things. So, therapy is one, meditation, all these different things, so we don't pass that on to, our other offspring as well.
Family constellation therapy, perhaps.
Exactly.
This is what I do, guys. This is why I want to have Len on the podcast, because I wanted someone to talk about the science behind generational trauma. Because even though I work as an intuitive and a medium and I do all this, trauma-informed therapy and spiritual stuff, there is a point to all of it. It's a yes and conversation. And for as much as I believe in connecting with your ancestors on a spiritual and energetic and emotional level, we have to address the physical component of the vessel that is carrying the trauma through each generation. So to leave our audience with something powerful and motivational, if you were to meet someone, let's just say someone like me, who is in the process of healing their ancestral trauma, and they've got a lot that feels heavy and they're feeling weighed down by it, and they're looking for a way to feel that they can have a positive impact on their generation and the generations to come with your work, what would that be?
I would think it's contribution. There's one of my favorite books of all time is Man's Search for Meaning, Dr. Viktor Frankl, who was also a Holocaust survivor and wrote this book about his therapy, which is called logotherapy. And that therapy was, he started writing before the Holocaust, and his wife sewed the manuscript in his clothes. And when he got to the concentration camp, they took all that. So he had to rewrite everything from the years that he spent there. So one of the things he talks about is meaning. Our search for meaning is what gives us purpose. And in order for us, all of us, to have that sense of purpose, we have to find the meaning in our work. So, working with people like you, going through your own trauma, finding meaning in your work. And I talked about like all these different people have said, there's a reason why I do what I do. So people need to find meaning in their work. And if they don't have that meaning in their work, make a switch, do something else that's meaningful. Your contribution, you become selfish because it feels so good to do something for somebody. It comes back to you tenfold. I'm like, I want more of that. Give me more of that. I want to do more. And this cycle, and you're really uplifting everybody. I know it sounds hokey, but you're really uplifting the world in doing that because you start vibrating at a higher frequency. And when you do that, it attracts other high frequencies back to you, and you're able to uplift everybody. So find that meaning in whatever work you're doing.
From the science of our DNA with Len, now we move into the art of our voice with Krista Williams. And this moment with Krista honestly has to be one of my personal favorites of the entire year because it was a huge milestone for me to have her on my podcast. She put out an email to her community and said, our new book is coming out, her and Lindsay, the hosts of Almost 30. And she said, I'd love to come on your podcast and talk about my book. So if you have a podcast, let me know. And I just like quickly responded back. And within 24 hours, she was booked on the Heal with Kat podcast. And that was a huge, like I said, milestone moment for me. This was one of my favorite conversations because she really transformed my understanding of what it means to use my voice in my life. And as somebody who's constantly using my voice and has always used my voice, it really shifted my intention with it. So this episode is really a reminder that finding your voice is actually more of a spiritual initiation. And it's often one of the first steps in becoming a cycle breaker. So here's that clip.
That's why I attended the first Camp Almost 30 in 2021. And I had some big aha moments in that experience that really, you know, you and Lindsay became such expanders for me in those ways of being okay with wanting more and being seen more and expanding more. But you touched on something else that I think is really powerful. You loved reading the book and you loved like using your voice to speak the book, and you use your voice for the podcasts, and you're doing all these amazing speaking engagements. I saw you just did your voice activation retreat in Oceanside, which is up the street from where I grew up. And so your voice is one of your greatest tools. And it sounds like that is your voice is really kind of a bridge into this okay to want more path that you've taken. I would love if you could share how your relationship to your voice has evolved, especially through things like divorce, healing, spiritual growth, and being confident in using your voice.
Yeah, the voices, it's something I'm so passionate about because it's a manifestation of our soul. It's a manifestation of our mind, and it's a manifestation that happens through the body. The voice is what moves people. The voice is what makes change. The voice is what is going to be the linchpin to the life that you want, whether it's a deep, intimate relationship, or whether it's promotion, or whether it's a career, or whether it's to be on stages, or whether it's honest friendships. Like, we have to communicate and use our voice in every single area of our life. So when I talk about the voice, I talk about the actual texture and tone of the quality of your voice. And then I'm also talking about the words that you're speaking. And I'm talking about the voice written, the voice heard, the voice spoken. So there's so many different layers to the voice. You know, it's just such a nuanced thing. But what I've come to realize over time is that it's been my most powerful tool. And that the more I've been able to focus on becoming a better speaker, becoming more clear, becoming more regulated, becoming more truthful with myself and truthful with others, and being able to speak my truth in hard times, like, the better my life has become. You know, I have amazing, deep friendships that are true and honest and that are real because I'm able to communicate. I have amazing team members that feel seen and heard because we're able to communicate together. I have the podcast, which is an expression of my voice. Like, people connect with the words that I say and my voice on the show. So it's been something that I didn't see coming as my medicine in this life and as my gift or my, you know, tool, like I mentioned. But once I really noticed it and noticed its power, my life completely changed. And so for anyone that wants to explore the voice and sort of how they can expand their voice in the world, I think it's really helpful just to start to noticing the voice, noticing the body, and noticing the mind. So the voice is like the amalgamation of the three. We can have thoughts, the inner voice in our mind, and oftentimes those thoughts can be deemed as bad or good. We can like some of our thoughts, we can not like some of our thoughts, but noticing the thoughts often happens in meditation or reflection or contemplation. So we notice the inner thoughts of the mind because the inner thoughts of the mind create the external reality. So the inner voice is very important. And then we also notice the body whenever we're speaking. So often people will clam up, they'll get tight, they'll, get up here, they'll forget how to breathe, they'll do all these things. So the body is actually a participant in what's happening with the voice and how the voice is being expressed. The body is also speaking. The body is also communicating or preventing communication in a lot of different ways. And so being at peace with what we're saying and at peace with the voice happens with finding peace within the body. And then the actual voice, like texture and tone, is so important. Our voices and the frequency of our voices actually matches the frequency of people's brainwave patterns. So if you speak really regulated and calm and peacefully, you actually can create that same internal environment in someone's mind. If you speak very deeply, you can create like almost like a sedative brainwave state for people. If you speak very high and you're like really in your head and you're like this, you're going to actually stress people out. And so your voice is making people feel something with the words and then with the tone. And what I've found the most, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, is that the people that are the most authentic are the best speakers. The people that are the most powerful are the best speakers. Every single person that you could think of right now that's powerful or that's doing big work is a clear communicator or a unique speaker or has some way that their voice is being shared in the world. And so the more we can really think about doing that, making peace with our thoughts and our body and mind, the more power and impact we're going to have. And I think for everybody listening right now, your community, I mean, these are people that definitely should have more impact because I'm sure they're just amazing.
Oh, wow. I just thank you for that wisdom you just dropped because it's awesome, especially for someone like myself who does a lot of speaking. I'm like, damn, okay, yeah, I totally vibe with that. I can imagine too, what I'm hearing you say kind of in between the lines is something like, you have to evolve with your voice. Your voice will evolve as you start to understand how to harness it and how to use it and what to use it for. Is that kind of what you're alluding to as well? Hey everyone, it's Kat popping in during the episode today to tell you about my free cycle breaker quiz. Do you ever feel like you're the black sheep of your family, or maybe you find yourself stuck in the same family patterns or dynamics over and over again with no relief? Well, what if I told you you could transform that role into something really, really powerful? When you take my cycle breaker quiz, I help you understand the childhood coping tools that are showing up in your adult life today. And by understanding how you show up with your family and the role you play, this can be the portal into understanding the patterns of your lineage. Ready to embrace your role? Go to katdow.com/cycle breaker to take the quiz or visit the link in the show notes below. Your transformation from black sheep to cycle breaker starts right now.
Yeah, I think I can even tell the story of my voice as an example. So we started the podcast in 2016, but before that, I thought I wanted to be a SoulCycle instructor. I was living in New York City. I was in the corporate world and I was working a bunch of different corporate jobs that I was successful in, but I didn't feel successful. I didn't feel aligned. I didn't feel excited. I would go cry in this conference room every day. I was miserable because I wanted to do something with meaning in my life. So I felt like that was going to be SoulCycle. So I auditioned I auditioned for SoulCycle because through the process of trying to be an instructor, you have to audition, you have to interview and then audition. And an audition is basically just performing songs in front of a room of other people that are auditioning to become instructors. So I get my songs ready. I get on the bike in front of this room of people that are also auditioning in front of these instructors that are grading you. And I put on like the Britney Spears style microphone on my head and I'm like putting it on and my music comes on and I go to talk in front of this room of other instructors at this audition. And I wanted to have my head to like go back into the wall because I could not stand to hear my voice projected in front of the room. I felt embarrassed. I felt stupid. I almost started put on this like comedian act. Like it was very weird. I was like trying to be cool. Like it was bizarre to see me react to being projected in front of the room on a microphone. And that says so much about your worth, about your power, about your belief in yourself, about your grounded, it just says so much. So after that, I started to get vocal lessons with someone in New York City. So I was working in New York City at the time. So every Wednesday I'd go an hour uptown to get vocal lessons with this vocal coach for an hour. And I did it for almost a year. And I thought I was doing it for SoulCycle to be a better instructor, to be better on the microphone when I auditioned again, but it was actually for almost 30. And by taking those vocal lessons and really learning about my voice and learning how to be better on the microphone and learning about the accent that I have, because I grew up from Ohio, and learning about breathing in through the belly and like the texture and tone of our voice, and how a lot of us are taught to be up here and we're taught to be in our head. And it's like, yeah, that's really cool. And oh my God, that's amazing. And wow, cool. You know, especially as women, most of us are taught that our voice is best being high, when actually it's like the best when it's low and rich and in our body. So I just learned so much about the voice. So that really started me on my journey of actually changing my voice and actually having more of a voice that was made for me and meant for me. And the truth of who I was now in part of the voice. So over the years with the podcast, my voice has changed completely. My voice changes all the time. You know, like I can hear it subtly. I don't think anyone else could. But if I'm really embodied, if I just got a massage, my voice is like buttery, rich, juicy, deep. If I'm being really honest, my voice is buttery, rich, juicy, deep. If I'm being out of integrity or I'm not being myself, I'll hear my voice kind of up in my head. And I just use it as a gauge and monitor to see how authentic I'm being, to see how connected I am, to see how truthful I am. And I think everyone, when they really tune to the voice and the texture and tone, can use it as a guide and gauge to how authentic they're being.
That's such powerful medicine. I really hope it meets the right people, because that is really fucking powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Next, we're stepping into a conversation that hit home for so many women, and especially for my cycle breaker caregivers and parentified children out there. I think this might have been the most supportive for you. When Katherine Fabrizio broke open the good daughter pattern and explained how guilt keeps so many women stuck in relationships, it really showed how much it resonated with y'all, because you made it one of my top listened to episodes of the entire year. So when you listen to this, prepare to feel a little called out, and also then you're going to feel like you were wrapped in a big, warm, cozy hug. Let's revisit Katherine's wisdom that she shared.
I want to touch on this guilt thing, because I can't tell you how many times women come to me for FCT, family constellation therapy, and they are like, I feel guilty. First of all, they're parentified. They're usually the oldest daughter. There's usually some sort of abuse going on, whether it's emotional, physical, or any other kind. And they feel responsible for keeping the family system together. And the guilt is this, I feel, and I want to hear your thoughts on this deeply. I feel the guilt is them saying, if I let go of holding the family together, who's going to hold it together? And what is that going to mean for my belonging? And that's hard to grapple with.
It's hard to grapple with. I've kind of lived it, as you might imagine. When you write a book like I wrote, your good girl crown kind of slips a little bit. But to speak more to your question, I think education is so valuable that you take a good look at what role you've played all along. And it's hard. This is tough medicine. Because if you're in the good daughter role, chances are you've gotten praise for a segment of your behavior, and that quickly becomes your whole identity. You don't think it's a role. You just think it's how you and mom are getting along, and you really are that wonderful, except for maybe she's always trying to fix you and you can't quite be good enough. But then you hear her bragging to other people, or she says, I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the only one I could talk to. Again, like you mentioned, like the parentification, the inappropriate, the enmeshed, the appropriation. That's a word. Like she takes, like you are hers, you're her baby doll, you're hers to use as a therapist many times, or be her ally in family fights. So, I mean, there's so much. This is really where the tension lies. So I talk about unconscious contracts. You might as well. I say that our survival brain, when we're little, can make a contract or an agreement with mom. I will be responsible for your emotional well-being. So if you take a mom who's easily dysregulated, insecure, easily upset, again, throughout development, daughters learn, don't rock the boat. If I show my feelings, mom gets upset, and this duad doesn't work. They'll be held to pay if I disappoint mom, if I talk back to her, if she knows that I'm texting my best friend and not telling her all my secrets. I mean, it goes on, but it first starts off as just survival. It's pre-verbal.
Yeah. And it sounds like it spills over into other areas of life, this good daughter syndrome.
And then of course it would. So if that's how you're used to being in a relationship, then why wouldn't it could be a man, it could be a woman, a narcissistic personality comes along and they're like, oh yeah, that's my flavor. I know what to do in this relationship. I put their emotional needs first. I make them look good. I'm great arm candy. I'm polite. Family loves me or family loves me. So it's a role, I'd slip it on like a pair of bedroom slippers. It just feels comfortable until it doesn't. So, and this is funny because when I first started off in practice, I would get more people come to me who were involved in those kinds of relationships. Then I would touch the mother-daughter stuff and they would go, well, I'm not going to talk about my mother. That was like kind of the last taboo. Or people would come to me and say, yeah, the first therapist I saw said my mother was a narcissist. And so I quit that therapist. But now 10 years ago, I see that she, there's some problems there. So yeah, if that's your template, then you're, kind of the girlfriend that always comes through. You end up in unbalanced relationships because you kind of more implicitly, you gravitate towards it. You know your place. You know how to belong. You're the good one.
The primal part of us that needs our mothers always blows my mind. And I'm just wondering if you can lean into that a little bit and kind of talk us through that. Hey everyone, it's Kat popping in during the episode today to tell you about my free cycle breaker quiz. Do you ever feel like you're the black sheep of your family, or maybe you find yourself stuck in the same family patterns or dynamics over and over again with no relief? Well, what if I told you could transform that role into something really, really powerful? When you take my cycle breaker quiz, I help you understand the childhood coping tools that are showing up in your adult life today. And by understanding how you show up with your family and the role you play, this can be the portal into understanding the patterns of your lineage. Ready to embrace your role? Go to katdow.com/cyclebreaker to take the quiz, or visit the link in the show notes below. Your transformation from black sheep to cycle breaker starts right now.
Here are just some thoughts. Usually, mom is a role model. So that's identity and our major attachment figure. In a more traditional family, she's the one we spend a lot of time with. Pre-verbally, so much of this stuff is laid down. So we're looking in her eyes. Is she okay with what we just did? Do we have our experience mirrored back? But also, if you think about parenting, the empathy, like if my daughter were to fall down and scrape her knee, it's not an intellectual process that I go, oh gosh, are you okay? I know that hurt. No, my knee hurt. Oh, I don't have to think about it, but it's just automatic. I'm, as most mothers are, empathizing with the daughter's experience. Okay, now let's say she comes home from, just one out of many examples, comes home from school. She's a first grader and her best friend shows another person to play with on the playground and she's upset. If I'm a narcissistic mom, I might say, well, you always, you're just selfish. You always have to play what you want to play. No wonder, your friend didn't want to play with you. I mean, talk about it unempathetic, because she has not dealt with that within herself, because she doesn't belong. She has to be superior. She deep down feels a lot of shame and feels like it's her fault. So she's going to, at every moment we're projecting on, as we're empathizing, we're also projecting to the child. Or you're at a birthday party and your child, gets really upset that her best friend gets the doll that she's been wanting. If you're not okay with your own feelings of envy as a mother, you're going to project that. Don't be jealous. That's an ugly emotion. Or you're going to send however you've dealt with or not dealt with those things inside of yourself. So it's over and over and over again. You can't help but mold that other person's nervous system. And that's why a lot of what I talk about is that the implicit ideas are conveyed through a gesture. So from mother to daughter, many times we're communicating, the left brain is linguistic, logical, and, head knowledge. And the right brain's another way to talk about the somatic or unconscious. We're communicating right brain to right brain. So we know in a nanosecond. It's like I knew if I was okay, if mom was okay with me, by the tone of voice. Talk to a good daughter. She's going to know. She picks up the phone within the tone of voice, how that discussion's going to go. So we're picking this stuff up on a somatic level so much all the time throughout development. That's extremely threatening. We may read a blog on boundaries and go, okay, I'm going to set a boundary. And then Their implicit brain is, no, danger, danger. You're not going to live through this. And we're like, can't find our words. That's a whole lot of concepts kind of rolled into one. But the idea is that, we're looking in mom's face. We're just picking up all this stuff. And women are socialized to be supportive, to appear one way. And so we can be sarcastic. We can roll an eye, shoulder shrug, just the right look mom can give us. And we know, or I used to know, like I walked in a room and my dress was a little bit too short, a little bit too low, or my tone of voice wasn't, I would know just like that. And husbands, brother, they don't pick it up. I think it's mostly a female thing.
Well, I was going to ask, is it possible that the good girl, is it possible that the good daughter syndrome can show up with a father?
Yes, I think it translates differently. And I'm not an expert on that. I don't have brothers. I don't have sons. I just know women. Usually a narcissistic, I would say usually is, narcissistic dad is more explicit and on the nose. I think it can be just as damaging in a different way. I think women, they're more mixed messaging.
Hey everyone, it's Kat popping in during today's show to tell you about one of my favorite tools that I created just for you. If you have ever felt stuck in family patterns or you've always felt like the black sheep of your family, my free cycle breaker quiz will help you turn that role into a superpower. In just a few minutes, you'll discover the archetype you've been carrying, gain clarity on the hidden strengths it's given you, and even understand how to break free from the patterns that are holding you back in this role. You'll also get a personalized mini podcast episode with a ton of insights and tools. So take the quiz today at katdow.com/cyclebreaker and start your shift from black sheep to cycle breaker today. Link is also in the show notes below. All right, let's get back to the show. This next moment with Laura Larios is one that I still think about because it landed home for me and so many listeners. The way that she spoke about abandonment, regulation, and what it means to truly long for a father's presence, it just touched something tender for so many of us with the father wound. And what I love about Laura is that she doesn't blame, she doesn't shame, and she doesn't judge the fathers that left behind the father wound. She actually tries to understand them because she knows, like many of us in this community, that when we approach wounds with understanding, when we approach people with understanding, then we start to understand how their wounds might still be reliving inside of us. It's a whole different way of approaching healing. And that awareness is the first step in cycle breaking. So here's that clip with Laura.
Also, I see this a lot with women. I mean, men too have father wounds, and the drive to cultivate things that feel unaccessible, like meaning like money, success, and self-sufficiency, because the presence of a father who was critical or controlling or even absent, maybe you just had a father that wasn't around very much, taught us that taught our nervous system that dependence is dangerous. So this belief in our system often shows up as hyper-independence, the relentless pursuit of self-reliance. Again, so we're never vulnerable to rejection or disappointment or abandonment. Again, it can manifest as perfectionism or an intense need for control or a fear of asking for help. And while these patterns may help us feel safe temporarily, they also isolate us from connection and support that our nervous systems truly need in order to heal and thrive.
What I love that you just touched on is the theme of abandonment and how it shows up. There's like two sides of the same coin for it. So sometimes you had a controlling father and that causes you to act a certain way, but then sometimes you have an absent father and it causes you to go into the same theme. Can you touch on that a little bit more? Because I think when it comes to like healing family trauma, people think that there's only like one narrow way that things happen. And when they come to me, I'm like, yes, you heard this on a podcast, but also this is your family. It's not going to show up the same way every single time. Like we have to look at the nuances of things at times.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. There's a lot of nuance. So when we've experienced some form of abandonment from our father, so whether that was abandonment from receiving his love in some form, right, or safety. Again, our systems are wired for safety. It's always looking for that. In order for us to have a secure attachment, and have a secure attachment is what leads us to have a regulated nervous system. It's like, stress can happen. We can get triggered, but we're able to come back to a place of safety in our system and presence and connection, right? But for people that grew up in households or had fathers, for example, or parental father figures that were either emotionally absent, like they were physically in the home, but they were not like, really speaking with you or asking about your day. They weren't emotionally available in any way. Maybe they were physically there, but they weren't really attuned to you or asking how you were doing. So again, there's not really like secure attachment being built between you and your father. And so there's like the system's picking up on these cues. Then even if he's physically present, that I'm not important or I'm not safe, essentially, because there's a lack of connection here. And then of course, if there's any type of criticism or like, from your father or parental figure, father figure that was harsh or judgmental, that's also going to cue that we're not safe. And so it's also going to cue like needing to it's going to trigger these protector parts. And that's a whole other conversation we can go into. But essentially these different parts of us can start to develop, like the achiever or the perfectionist or the controller, as a way to try to keep us safe from experiencing that shame again that we feel when we heard maybe that criticism from our father. So again, it's lack of safety. It's lack of that emotional attunement from our fathers. And again, oftentimes because generationally, our fathers didn't experience this either. And oftentimes they're repeating the same nervous system patterns and cycles that they experienced growing up. And so that is what leads to this abandonment wound of not being met. We have unmet needs, whether those are emotional needs, physical needs. Usually it's a combination of sometimes both, but sometimes for a lot of clients I serve, it's more emotional. Like physically, they were very well cared for. Their fathers sometimes even showed up to their sports games, right? Like they say, my father was there. But then when we go a little bit deeper, we find that their father, yes, was physically there, but emotionally not very present and never really, was that involved in their lives in some ways emotionally.
And even to expand on that, I work a lot with women and we work a lot on the mother wound. And a lot of times when we're doing family constellation, I will put in the role of the father on the papers to support the child, because sometimes when mom has an emotional breakdown or she's emotionally unavailable herself, or there's a lot of like parentified child roles happening with mom, then sometimes dad emotionally doesn't come in and provide the support that the child needs. So oftentimes I'll put, even if we're focusing on the maternal line, I will put in a masculine figure in the field to make sure that the client, the child, has that stability and the safety to move forward, that there's like balance between the two. And it kind of got me thinking on that, as well as sometimes we come into working on our families and we think, well, my mom is the problem.
Yeah.
But actually it's, well, maybe the focus is your mom, but also where was your dad?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Kat, I love that you shared this, because absolutely. And it's interesting because I have clients I've worked with as well that will talk about, I have a great relationship with my father. It was my mom who was the one who was critical, or the one that was kind of up and down emotionally. And it was hard. I was like walking on eggshells around her, but dad was like the constant in the home. And yet you go just a little bit deeper though, and we find that, dad was there, but he wasn't really stepping in. Like, let's say mom was being critical and maybe dad was just kind of there in the background, or he wasn't home. Maybe he was at work at that moment or whatever. And so there still wasn't that element of our system picking up on safety or protection from our fathers. And that's really what they represent, and bringing up that consistency of being that safety for us. I mean, our mothers are supposed to represent that safety too, but it's in a different way that the mothers give the safety versus the father. And so, yeah, absolutely. I love that you shared that, because we can have these, it's funny too, because we can even I idolize our relationship with our father, is like, because he seemed so opposite of our mother, and we're not even realizing that. And I'm not saying it's always the case, but like oftentimes when I have clients coming to see me, though, there's some element there where they felt like dad didn't stand up for them, or dad didn't say anything, or dad just, just wasn't like physically present or emotionally present in some way.
Or even made it about himself.
Or that too. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I spent 10 years working on the father wound. I spent 10 years in different modalities working on my father's family. And I just had my friend who does my FCT. She's like, Kat, you've done it all. You need to stop. You need to find something else to work on. And I was like, but there's so much. And I think that it's like this grief that I went through of grieving the father wound. And then when I started going into the mother wound, realizing, oh shit, did I have two dysfunctional parents? And then the freak out. And then as soon as I started going into the mother wound, I was like, oh wait, I need a parent. And so I went to and so it's just like this constant like who do I go to and where do I turn and where am I getting the safety? And do I even have safe relationships with my parents? And if I don't, then what is my response to that? And that's, I think, part of just emotional maturity is like really being able to see things for what they are, process your emotions in a really safe and held way. And then you get to create boundaries in your life of what kind of relationships you want to have. And then, where, like I said, where's your energy going and what is best served for you? And that was my journey is, okay, here's what this relationship looks like here. Here's what this relationship looks like here. But how am I taking care of myself? Because I can't control them anymore.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that with me, Kat. Like it's quite a journey, right? When you start to unravel these different pieces and these different layers. And one piece that I love that you just spoke to was like how, our nervous systems are so intelligent, how God designed us. It's remarkable in the sense that our nervous systems will never show us something until it's ready to be seen. And so, like I said, there's oftentimes these layers, like just when we think like, oh, okay, that's like completed, we find sometimes there's like another layer or something underneath that. And it's not to make it sound like, oh, we're always just doing this work, right? And it gets like, exhausting. It's like, no, it can be liberating. There's a lot of freedom and joy and peace that's experienced in this process. And again, at the same time, like the more stabilized our system becomes, the more capacity we start to have for these different ways that we were not met, the way in the sense that being able to actually see and feel maybe what wasn't completed at that time, there was no resolution for in our system, and we start to get some resolution, right? Then sometimes another layer will show up because more and more things are, getting resolved. And so I just think it's so beautiful that you have been on this 10-year journey of unraveling these different pieces that your system has been trying to find resolution around. I can relate a lot to what you're sharing. And I will say one other piece here for me, just personally speaking, and everyone has a different journey in their life with spirituality. But, for me, having God as my father, really learning how to be a daughter. I didn't know how to be a daughter. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And even though God, like we don't usually think of God as like this, obviously this physical person. And sometimes there is a little bit of a transition for our system because initially I had to, like you said, have another, in my own healing, like have other masculine figures in my life physically so that my system could have examples and blueprints of what it was like to be held by the masculine in a safe way and be met in ways I had never been met. And then once I had just a little bit of that blueprint, I was then able to like really fully surrender to God. And then he really showed me like what love was and like how to like come to him whenever I was upset and how he was going to provide for me and that there was no shame, there was no condemnation. And I think it's still a process my system is learning with him, and I welcome it, but I'm just love that like how I've just softened to the point where now I'm like, I want to be your daughter. I want to know what that's like to be a daughter. And
from the nervous system, we shift into the physical body. I had Dr. Bilstrom on selfishly because at the time that he was on the podcast, I had been diagnosed with Hashimoto's and Epstein-Barr, and I was navigating endometriosis and healing from a concussion. So I wanted to understand all of that from like a much deeper lens. And it felt like a really important episode for me to share vulnerably as I was going through so much healing. And then I was mind blown with how many of you, especially on TikTok, deeply resonated with this episode. To this day, my autoimmune content is my best performing content. And I'm kind of sad for that in a way because it means that so many women are also struggling with this. And also, now we can provide information for people to hear different perspectives for all women who are navigating this. And this clip from Dr. Bilstrom, it went viral, especially the story about bringing 6 people out of comas with acupuncture. This guy is amazing. If I lived closer to him, he'd be my guy. This moment helps so many people understand autoimmune illness through a whole new lens. Let's go back to it.
Quickly, I started doing about 100 acupuncture treatments a week. And I did that for quite a few years in big hospital systems, seeing everything under the sun. Things that you might say, oh, that sounds logical for acupuncture. And then things you go like, oh, I didn't know you could do acupuncture for that. Including I'm 6 for 6, bringing people out of comas with acupuncture.
No way.
who are like in the intensive care unit for months. They don't wake up. They can maybe get them off the breathing machine, maybe get them off the dialysis machine. They just wouldn't wake up. And eventually, months and months into this, somebody says, isn't there somebody that has acupuncture around here? Can they do anything? And 5 out of the 6 times it took 15 minutes. One time I had to come back the next day and do another 15 minutes. And within 15 minutes, they just wake up and go, hey, where am I? And then they're out the door the next day. And so you can really impact the body in a wonderful way. Now, acupuncture basically works by getting the body to fix itself. And that was kind of a bit of a new thing for me, because that's not how most medicine works. But then it really got me thinking pretty quickly, well, what else is out there that I didn't learn about in my traditional training that might be able to help these folks with these chronic health issues? And with acupuncture, I was seeing people with every chronic health issue you can imagine, not just the spinal cord injured population, the paralyzed population. And so from there, I trained in integrative medicine, functional medicine being trying to ask the question, well, why do people get what they get? And by knowing why they get it, we're in a position to reverse the process. And pretty quickly, the population with autoimmune disease, where you're attacking your own body parts, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, there's hundreds of different, there's 100 different names. It's really just one disease that can attack any body part. Mm-hmm. But this is why it's so easy once you get one chronic health issue, not just autoimmune, but one chronic health issue, it's so easy to get a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth. Because if you don't fix why you got the first thing, the why keeps pushing you the wrong direction, and you keep getting more on top of the original. And the medications that typically just put bandages on symptoms don't address why, and it might temporarily help you, it might not. But you keep getting new stuff all the time. And then a second med, a third med, a fourth, 15 meds, and you're still like feeling like crud. And so I was starting to see the population a lot with autoimmune disease, where you're attacking your own body parts. And the traditional meds that are used for that basically just put a bandage in a bullet hole, a couple of symptoms, but they don't fix why. So you keep feeling worse and worse and all this. And then I read this heart-wrenching story of this really famous journalist who I read about in the New York Times, about how she was losing her career and her life to lupus, one of the autoimmune diseases. And her story is one I'd heard hundreds, if not 1,000 times at that time. I have these health issues that are getting worse and worse. I go to doctor after doctor. Nobody knows what's wrong. And it's 3 years, it's 5 years. And oh my gosh. And then somebody finally goes, oh, well, you have this autoimmune thing. And then you ask, well, how did I get it? Well, we have no idea how you get that stuff. Well, how do you make it go away? Well, there's no way we make it go away. You're going to have it for life. And we can give you some medicines that will temporarily put, a bandage on a few symptoms, but it's going to keep getting worse and worse. Mm-hmm. And so here she was, she finally got the answer what she had. And she was offered, basically just a bandage, temporary bandage. And her quality of life, of course, terrible. She couldn't work, couldn't do it. And I go, this is so sad. I've heard this so many times. Somebody has to change the way autoimmune disease and chronic disease in general is dealt with worldwide. And then I've been on about a decade mission to change that.
You mentioned the word allopathic or allopathic medicine. What does that word mean?
So allopathic medicine is basically Western medicine.
Okay.
The traditional Western medicine, where we tend to offer a medicine for a symptom, but they don't tend to actually address why you get things. And this is, Western allopathic medicine kind of started in Paris in the 1820s. Hospital-based medicine, hospital-based medical education. And then that kind of made its way over to the United States. And so this is where everybody goes to hospitals, not just for the medical education, but for their medical care. But the medical care is really great when it comes to like traumas. There's no place better in the world than the United States. If you get in a terrible trauma, the emergency room docs, the emergency room people, the trauma surgeons, all this kind of stuff. If you need surgery, we can take care of it. And but we're not good at all with kind of this traditional allopathic Western medicine with chronic disease. We keep trying to, say, well, let's do a surgery. Here's a medication. Kind of the traditional stuff that we've sort of been trained in, but just does not do the trick when it comes to chronic disease, and does absolutely nothing for prevention, of course. Absolutely nothing for prevention. And it's very sad to me, including we had last month Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And on TV, everybody talked about breast cancer awareness, breast cancer awareness. All these docs were on the talk shows. And I kept hearing over and over again, the key to breast cancer is early detection. And I'm like, oh, come on. You're not going to do anything to prevent it. Nothing. You're not going to teach anything to prevent it. All you're going to do is just sit there and wait for somebody to get it. And then when they get it, we're going to detect it early. I'm saying you're missing the point. We could probably prevent 95% of all breast cancer. And for the people that kind of slip through the cracks, well, early detection is great. But I was so appalled at that. I did a whole series of videos about how you prevent breast cancer, including what drives autoimmune disease. The system to attack its own body part drives all chronic disease. Cancer is the flip side of the same coin, this autoimmune disease. So everything that drives autoimmune disease drives cancer. Anything you do to prevent autoimmune disease prevents cancer. Anything you do to reverse autoimmune disease prevents cancer. Anything you do to when somebody gets cancer to address why they got the cancer, because ideally with cancer, you say, well, let's get rid of the cancer. Surgery, radiation, chemo, whatever. But you got to go back and address why they got the cancer in the first place. Otherwise, the why keeps pushing you back to the same cancer again, or a new cancer. And it's so sad when I see, and clearly I grew up playing tennis, and I played tennis in college, in the top 20 team. And I see women in tennis, some of the women that were, sort of my idols growing up, they've had breast cancer twice, 3 times. Well, they had breast cancer. Now they got this other cancer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so sad. Nobody's addressing why you get this stuff, preventing in the first place, but nobody's even addressing why you get a health issue, so that you get rid of the health issue and you've done your due diligence to prevent new stuff over time.
I have such a personal connection to so much of what you're saying. It's kind of giving me this little feeling in my stomach of like, oh, somebody that understands someone like me. I was pushed around a lot in the Western medical system with endometriosis, gut issues, thyroid issues. I've tested positive for RA before, Epstein-Barr, and I know a lot of people have these things, but it just goes to show, I think, how many of us are walking around with these physical ailments and we don't understand that there is a root cause. And it took me 33 years for someone to finally, a functional doctor, to finally look at me and go, I think this issue, all of your issues are tied to a gut issue, tied to streptococcus that you received from scarlet fever when you were a kid. Like someone after 33 years of going through surgeries and all kinds of medicine and all different kind of avenues was finally able to say, hey, I think I know the root cause. So it's really empowering to talk to somebody like you who truly cares about the root cause and understanding, and having the knowledge to look at someone like me and go, hey, we can find a root cause. It's not impossible. And a lot of things that went through my mind, you touch on the cancer topic, is like, if we have so-called, found cures for cancer, like let's just say that that's true, then how come we haven't found the root cause for so many other things? If cancer is supposed to be this big scary thing that so many people are dying from, shouldn't there be explanations for some of the lesser aggressive physical issues, like with their illnesses that they're dealing with? So I guess, why is autoimmune disease growing at such an alarming rate? If we have all these resources and we have all these people in the world like you who are trying to do so much for it, why is it still growing so quickly?
Well, I think even the bigger picture to that question is why is all chronic disease of all kinds growing at an exponential rate? We even have a title for these things that are so much more common now than they used to be. They're called the civilization diseases. Yeah. And so things like type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, chronic kidney disease, gut issues and autoimmune disease, high blood pressure, cholesterol, cancers. Guys are getting, or women are getting cancer in their 20s. Colon cancer used to be an older person's disease. Now it's all these people in their 20s getting colon cancer. Cataracts and macular degeneration, all these eye issues, all these brain issues. So like in kids, all this neuroinflammation. So in kids, if it's not autism spectrum disorder, it's developmental delay. Well, if it's not that, it's ADD or ADHD. Well, if it's not that, it's anxiety, depression, and suicide attempts. Well, if it's not that, it's migraines and seizures. And then in the adult population, you're dealing with so much brain stuff, including here we got this epidemic of all the neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, Lou Gehrig's disease. We just got, obesity, all this kind of stuff. And you go, holy cow, where's all this stuff coming from? Well, fortunately, so the question you said, well, why do we have so much autoimmune disease? It's a question like, well, why do we have all these civilization diseases? Because this is where chronic disease of all kinds is the same thing that's driving autoimmune disease. And we see this in developing nations. As people change their lifestyles, change their eating habits, lose their traditional practices. We got environmental toxins. We're eating foods that are super high processed. They're not even foods. I talk about like food-like substances. They're not even food, right? And also toxic light, blue light, artificial light at night. Artificial light at night, light pollution drives cancer, obesity, diabetes, heart attacks and strokes, all these kind of things.
And to close our best of episode of 2025, we're ending with a conversation that honestly felt like a blessing. Foster Wilson brought us back into the sanctity of birth, of motherhood, and the lineage work that begins before a baby is even earthside. I wanted to pick her brain and know her thoughts as a mother and a doula on how we can start to infuse more nurturing and motherly love into the community and into people these days, because I feel like there's so little of it. We're just in such a hyper-independent world. And she really brought it home with her reply, and watching it back recently actually brought me to tears. This clip is a reminder of just how sacred the mother line truly is and how much of an impact it can have on our planet. How do you view the role of motherhood or the act of mothering in shaping society in the world? Because I know that you say that you believe that nurturing plays such a crucial role in collective well-being. So I'd be so curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I love this question. And I want to preface this sort of idea of masculine and feminine energies and also mothering to be an active verb that is not gendered specifically. We have a history of having mothers do a lot of the nurturing roles, but a father, a non-binary parent is also a mother in many respects, right? I think the mothering energy is soft, it is listening, it is that idea that I was talking about before about being and feeling as opposed to doing. My experience of this society and culture that we live in here in America, at least, is a very masculine energy. Like we get up, we go to work, we do the thing, we clock in, clock out, or we're on our computers all day, and it highly values productivity. It highly values money and, ascension in the workplace and things that you can see and I can see and probably your audience can see can really lead to burnout and fatigue and addiction, all of these other things.
Chronic illness.
Exactly. Yeah. And your nature's going to tell you when to slow down, right? Nature is going to I wrote a whole article on the Drill magazine about how when I was a kid, I was going to school, middle school, and working really hard and doing all the things and getting straight A's and all those bogus things. And whenever Christmas would come, I would get sick every time because as soon as I had a break, my body would just shut down. And it was, nature's way of saying, stop, do less. It's a long lesson for me to learn. When we're pregnant, we can do less. We have to learn that there's lots of obviously very fit people and continuing to work out and all of that. But there is an element of some things you cannot do when you're pregnant. You have to start to lean on other people a little bit, especially the third trimester. So there's a slowing down that comes with motherhood and this nurturing nurturing plays this role all throughout society that says, hey, we need to all collectively slow down. Healing is a mothering tool. When a kid skins his knee, the mother bends down and looks at it and sees him and sees his tears and wipes them away and gets the Band-Aid and listens to his pain and holds that space. Where, are they being productive? Like it's the antithesis of that. Nothing happened. We're just healing and we're nurturing. I think doulas come into the birth space to do that, to not be this masculine energy of running around and trying to fix all of the problems of birth. I'm putting those in quotes here, but instead to just accept, look at what's here, listen to what's going on, listen to the sounds that are being made from the person who's giving birth, and assess from there. I think we can all tap into that energy, whether you're a parent or not. It just happens to be a bit easier if we're really being present with a child to learn that, like, this is a different pace than what the rest of the world is. We talk about this a lot. The kids come into this world and they're these bright-eyed souls. I've held newborns, day in and day out, and I look at them and they kind of look up at me and look around. I'm like, I know you're here on this earth, right? It's pretty cool. But we have all these rules in society that we just made it up. And so then these kids are struggling because they're having to learn the rules of society that they didn't come into this planet with. So there's a gentleness there too. Really has to be able to teach that.
This conversation I could have all day long. I'm such a weirdo. I'm telling you, I don't openly talk about this a lot, but it seems like the right place to. I am such a weirdo where I will literally like daydream during the day about emotionally connecting with my kids. I can't wait for like, if something happens for me to just be like, oh, like, let me hold you. It's like this, I really want to be a mother. And I think that's part of it. It's like this deep desire to be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm going to be 34 next month. So I'm like, I should probably start having these important conversations. But nothing excites me more than knowing that I get to hold space and do the things for a child that were not done for me. And I think we all have opportunities, whether you're a parent or not, in society, with our friends, with our partners, with nephews, with nieces, with whatever, to do that more, to be more of a compassionate witness for the people in our lives. But like you said, children need it to like the nth degree because they're relearning, in the terms of what I believe, they're relearning how to be a human, and they're learning the rules of society and how things have changed since the last time their soul was here, and so many things. I'm curious, do you work with Mother Mary at all, like as a deity or anything?
No, I think I saw it briefly on your Instagram, but I'm not familiar. So please tell
Oh,
me.
no, I just thought it was so synonymous with what you were saying. I mean, I with my mother wound, and even my paternal lineage has quite a mother wound as well. Immigration from their mother country, from Lebanon, and having to come to the US, and even with my grandmother as well. When you were explaining that, I was like, man, that's really what Mother Mary is, like an example for me, and not in a religious context, just as like a deity or someone, a being to work with, that nurturing, that holding space, that care. It just makes me think of Mother Mary. So I was curious.
Yeah. No, I'm not as familiar. I think that's beautiful. I think in some respect, that's what I'm trying to pull out of myself more
Yeah.
as someone who's been so in their masculines for so much of my life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
beautiful. One thing about the postpartum period that you brought up that I want to
Mhm.
kind of circle back on, you
Sure.
mentioned that it's often a misunderstood part of a mother's journey. It's commonly overlooked. From your perspective as a postpartum doula, what are the biggest myths and what are the biggest truths about this, we'll call it sacred yet challenging time?
Yeah, I think one myth is really that this postpartum period is 6 weeks. There's a very odd thing where you don't see your doctor after birth until the 6 week mark, and then that's the only time you see them unless something's wrong. And they're supposed to give you the like, okay, you can go ahead and exercise and have sex now. Bye. Hopefully most doctors are not like that, but there's a lot that it's a very quick appointment. Postpartum, as I talked about, is after birth, right? So there is so much that goes on within our bodies, within our hormones, the gray matter of our brain that changes after birth. The hormones, depending on who you ask, can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to regulate. Continually regulating hormones as you're breastfeeding, if you have a long breastfeeding relationship, then that can really continue to be an ongoing change. And then our brains, there's some studies that say it doesn't even finish adjusting in for like 6 or 7 years. And then some people will say you're perpetually postpartum because you've given birth and now you're after. So that is a myth that I think will then tie into how long do I need support for? When are people going to stop visiting? And all of these choices that are made of like, by 6 weeks, I should be fine. And everyone's recovery is different. How you gave birth, whether or not you had any birth trauma, like small t or big T trauma in that experience, and just where you are emotionally. Where did you come in? What place were you in when you came into it? And now where are you after? So it is a very long process. So I always want everyone to give themselves grace, and the ability to know that healing is not linear. It is ups and downs here and there all the time. Secondly, I think the myth, and we talked a little bit about this, that like, if you're lucky enough to have a partner in this journey as a parent, like my partner and I will be fine on our own. As you said, we're what did you say? Hyper individualized society?
Hyper-independent society.
Hyper independent. Okay. So we think
inside,
right, exactly. We think we can do it all on our own and we'll be fine. And there is also a myth that's sent to women of like, you can have it all, you can do it all. I'm strong and independent and fierce. And that's wonderful. And there's so much of that in us. But also we're healing sometimes from a major operation and sometimes from a major opening of our souls between our legs, right? This is a huge thing. And it not only requires care, so family, friends, multiple people, doulas, support systems, but also just the acknowledgement of within yourself that this is a long process and it's okay to rely on other people. I am going to rely on other people now for a long time. And you will, your kids will be school age and you'll be like, hey, can you please come and pick her up from school? I can't make it. I'm stuck at work. Like, have a play date. And the other person be like, thank God, someone to play with my kid, right? Like, it's a community space. We all need to learn to do that give and take. And you're not no gold star for doing it on your own. Really, it just leads to burnout. And lastly, I would just say the myth of I need to get back to where I was before birth in any respect. Body, of course, there's all of this stuff thrown at us that like you need to get back into your pre-pregnancy body weight or size or anything, but also your mind and your spirit have undergone a massive opening. You've opened a portal that now takes a long time to close, and you are a butterfly now. We do not ask you to go back in the cocoon and go back to being a caterpillar. Like, how do I adjust to my new normal? And how do I accept everything about where I am right now? And that there is no place to go back to. We're all growing. We're all evolving. We don't go back to anything.
Thank you so much for spending this time with me and for revisiting some of the most powerful moments of this past year. When I look back at these conversations, what I feel the most, like I said earlier, is gratitude. Gratitude for the teachers, the conversations, the stories, the lineage work that we've done together. And for you, this community of people who have chosen healing, even when it wasn't easy or convenient or comfortable. This podcast has been such a sacred space for me. It's held so much of my evolution, my voice, my curiosity, and my own cycle breaking journey. And so as we close out this chapter, I want you to know that this is not an ending. It's just an expansion. We're stepping into something bigger, bolder, more of service, and more alive with the Heal with Kat show. And it's going to be a place where we'll bring all these conversations into real time with live callers, deeper healing, more intuition, and more community connection, which I think people are starting to realize that we need more of. Everything that we've built here becomes the foundation for what comes next in the show in 2026. So thank you for listening, for supporting this work, and for sharing these episodes with me, and just for being on the journey with me. I cannot wait to walk with you into this next season of healing and truth-telling and being of service. Don't forget, you can pre-order my new book, From Black Sheep to Cycle Breakers, starting next month in a couple of weeks. I'll be dropping an email in your inbox when it's available, so keep an eye out for that. And if you're not on my email list, you can go to katdow.com/the-book or visit the link in the show notes below, and you can sign up for the pre-order list. I'm giving away a free chapter of the book and some other goodies to whomever signs up. So with that, I'll see you on the Heal with Kat show. And until then, be gentle with yourself. You're doing sacred work. Have a blessed new year, and I'll see you in 2026, y'all.